For thousands of years, humans subsisted mainly on what we could grow or find in the wild, with seafood being one of our first protein sources. And while hunting and gathering brought people into regular contact with the land's resources, it was those who ventured out onto the seas who found an even richer source of food that helped them build the world's first big cities. Welcome to this channel. Today we are going to talk about how coastal diets built the first seafaring communities. The earliest evidence of human activity on the Japanese island of Okinawa dates back 32,000 years. During this time, the islands were home to small groups of hunter-gatherers. His diet consisted mostly of wild plants and animals, supplemented by seafood gathered from the coast and inland freshwater sources. But around 17,000 years ago, something changed. The skeletal remains of shellfish appeared in greater numbers near human settlements, suggesting they had become a more important part of the local diet. This dietary shift coincided with a warming climate and a rise in sea levels that may have caused many coastal plants and animals to disappear. So the Okinawans turned to shellfish for sustenance instead. Problem was that eating these shellfish came at a cost. To get to the tasty meat inside, you had to crack open hard shells, a difficult task that required time and effort. But rather than simply discarding the empty shells, the inhabitants of Okinawa crushed them into smaller pieces and saved their insides, which contained soft tissue and a substance called nacre, which is also found in pearls. Every few weeks, they would gather up their shell fragments in fresh water, grind the nacre-rich insides into powder, and mix it with water to make a thick paste. This paste was rich in calcium carbonate, a compound that's good for bone growth and can be used to strengthen other parts of the body, like teeth. In fact, the average person living in this time period had teeth twice as strong as ours, likely due to consuming this substance. These same people also started grinding stone tools, probably using the same freshwater source, into sharp flakes that could be used to cut shellfish more efficiently. The process of crushing the shells and mixing the contents with water was also likely done with tools, which freed up time for other tasks like building new tools and searching for food. All of this points to a change in the way life was lived. People no longer had to spend all their time finding food. They had learned to domesticate it, at least in a limited way. After the Ice Age ended, the ocean's rising waters brought a warmer climate to the Japanese islands. But along with the heat came tropical storms, high winds and torrential rains that battered the coast and washed away the shellfish that people depended on. Not to be deterred, the resourceful islanders started diving for shellfish. They wore goggles made from reeds or seaweed to protect their eyes and used barbed hooks made of shells or bone to catch fish and shellfish. But diving only got them so far. So some islanders began sailing in boats out into deeper waters in search of food. As early as 14,500 years ago, these intrepid explorers ventured into the ocean's vastness and discovered fertile fishing grounds where large schools of fish and shellfish congregated. With a reliable new source of food, these coastal communities grew. More people settled in coastal areas, and these settlements quickly became some of the largest permanent villages anywhere in the world. Their population boom allowed them to specialize in jobs other than food gathering. Some folks focused on making boats, while others crafted fishing nets or tended to gardens where they grew yams, rice, and millet. This division of labor meant that not everyone needed to spend all their time searching for food. And this gave some people the leisure time to focus on other pursuits, like inventing new technologies. In fact, it's thought that the world's first pottery was created during this time period by these very same people. Pottery was useful for boiling shellfish and fish, cooking rice, and preserving food. These innovations helped lead to yet another surge in population growth and enabled the first large seafaring communities to flourish. One such community was the Jomon people. They thrived in Japan between 14,500 and 300 years ago and took full advantage of the coastal lifestyle. The Jomon were expert boat builders and fishermen. They used dugout canoes made from giant cedar trees, which they paddled and steered with a double-bladed oar. Their fishing nets were made of a plant fiber called hemp, and they used spears tipped with sharp stone or bone points to catch fish. The Jomon also kept pigs, dogs, and fowl. They were the first people in Japan to raise these animals for food, though most archaeologists believe these animals were domesticated elsewhere, brought to Japan later by the Jomon. But just because the Jomon lived near the ocean didn't mean they spent all their time at sea. Life revolved around the seashore. but their villages were typically located on riverbanks or near freshwater springs. This is because both plants and animals tend to gather in large numbers near bodies of fresh water. Many of the plants and animals people ate required fresh water to live. Fish traveled upstream to spawn, and deer and wild boar came to drink. Having a settlement close to these migration routes provided a nearly endless supply of food. It also put them in close proximity to the forests needed for building materials and farming land. Archaeologists have uncovered dozens of settlements like this, each with unique characteristics. One settlement on the northern island of Hokkaido was made up of pit dwellings covered with thatched roofs. Each house sat in its own courtyard surrounded by fences and storage pits. Archaeologists have found animal bones, stone tools, and fragments of pottery in these courtyards, indicating that everyday life here centered around the processing of animal skins, wood, and stone. Meanwhile, a settlement on the southern island of Kyushu boasted a massive communal hall that may have been used for religious ceremonies or social gatherings. All of these settlements are archaeological treasures that have taught us much about the Jomon people. But they were not without their drawbacks. The farther away your community was from the ocean, the less protected it was against raids from neighboring communities. If you weren't close enough to the sea to support yourself, then you had to travel to the coast to get food, exposing you to the possibility of attack. That's why communities situated near freshwater sources and coastal areas flourished, while those farther inland did not. Unfortunately, the Jomon way of life came to an end around 300 years ago, likely due to overpopulation, environmental changes, and pressure from migrating tribes. While the Jomon were wiped out, their way of life still resonates today. The coastal communities they established laid the foundation for the world's first cities, and their expertise in fishing helped feed millions of people across Asia. But while the Jomon people were thriving, another group of people were busy taming the lands of East Asia. To learn about the origins of Chinese civilization, stay tuned for next week's episode.